appreciate them so much. I really love the music today. I enjoyed so much the segue from how great is our God to how great thou art. Wasn't that great? And then back to how great is our God again. And so it's kind of a mix of a newer song with one of the older favorites. And I thought it was a tremendous segue into both. Well, take your Bibles and stand with me to Psalm 89. Psalm 89, if you would, please. And we're going to read a couple of verses out of Psalm 89. And I want to speak to you on a very important subject today, and that is children in crisis. Children in crisis. I'm going to read from verse 1 of Psalm 89. Then we're going to go down and read a portion from verse 30 through 36. It'll be on the screen behind me, but if you have your Bibles, please open them there. Psalm 89 begins like this in verse 1. I will sing of the mercies of the Lord forever. With my mouth will I make known thy faithfulness to all generations. Notice that, to all generations. Now go ahead to verse 30, and I'm going to read about 7 verses here. Verse 30 says, if his children forsake my law. Now this was Israel, but I'm going to apply it to our modern situation, okay, to America, to children of today. If his children forsake my law and walk not in my judgments, if they break my statutes and keep not my commandments, then will I visit their transgression with the rod and their iniquity with stripes. Nevertheless, my loving kindness will I not utterly take from him, nor suffer my faithfulness to fail. My covenant will I not break, nor alter the thing that is gone out of my lips. Once I have sworn in my holiness, I will not lie unto David. His seed shall endure forever, and his throne as the sun before me. Let's pray. Our Father and our God, we come humbly in your presence, God, in the midst of a serious crisis that we're facing. And I pray in this message today that we can get that across to every one of our people, especially the parents and grandparents that are present with us, to realize, Lord, that there is a crisis in children and young people today that, if not turned around, will bring no doubt not just the end of our country, but of our civilization. That's how dangerous it is. And so, God, we ask that we can get this principle across in a way that every one of us will see its importance. Bless the message now, we pray, in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you. Be seated. I believe because we're living in the last days prior to the coming of Jesus Christ, and because of the way the world is around us, the word crisis has become a daily word in our vocabulary. Whether that crisis be from COVID or terrorism or crime or rioting in the streets or the epidemic of drug and alcohol addiction, suicide, and on I could go. But today I want to speak to you about another crisis that really only true Christians will notice and sadly will care about. But it's a crisis that's no less dangerous and life-threatening than any of those ones I just mentioned. And I believe it's a crisis of children not being taught the ways of God, not learning about the Lord. It is like when the prophet Amos said about a time in Israel when there was a famine, but not of bread or of water, but of hearing the words of the Lord. With fewer Christians in America than ever before, with less than 50% of Americans, I'm not even going outside our country, I'm just going to keep it to our nation as bad as it is, with less than 50% now attending church regularly, with God having been kicked out of the public forum, and more ungodly lifestyles being pushed in our society, is it any wonder that fewer and fewer children are hearing and coming to know about the Lord? Now the tragedy really comes because adults now in our present day have greater access to God's Word than ever before. And so no adult really, especially in a culture like ours, can ever blame anyone else but themselves if they don't come to the Lord, learn about Him, and be saved. However, children are ever at the mercy of the influence of adults to expose them, to engage them about the things that they will learn about. They don't know any better. They're just going to be brought up to follow whatever adults in their lives, parents, extended family, school, whoever, friends, peers, and so on. Now the tragedy is, friends, that I can't help say it but any other way, we are literally losing a generation of children. And as much as I believe Jesus could come today, soon, and I believe He will, but I can't guarantee that. If He hastens, or I should say, holds back His coming for 20, 30, 40 years, and He could, then the crisis that I'm going to describe today is going to grow into a tragedy unlike anything else that America's ever seen. We are literally losing a generation who does not know anything about God. The Southern Baptist Convention put out a very interesting survey recently. It was over some questions asked among workers and participants in all their youth ministries, from youth camps all the way down to VBS and so on. Listen to what their statistics ended up saying. I'm just going to read the numbers, not go into the commentary part that's in this article. 22%, this is children they were interviewing and finding out that came to youth events and kids programs. 22% of children witnessed violence in their homes. 27% had been involved in a physical attack. 19% had considered suicide. 20% had engaged in sexual intercourse. Nearly 60% had experimented with alcohol by age 13. 27% had tried drugs by that same age. 9% had experienced some kind of sexual violence. This is in a Southern Baptist. These are people coming to some Southern Baptist activity. Do you think those numbers would be a bit higher if you went out into the general public who never do go to things in a church setting? You think those numbers would be higher? I bet they'd be way higher. What an eye-opening survey. Now, friends, I don't need to convince anybody in this church, a church like ours that believes the Bible, that tries to live by it, I don't need to convince you how important children are to the Lord and how much God loves children. Let me give you a little quick Bible study of that. In Psalm 127 and verse 3 and 4, the Bible says, "Lo, children are a heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is His reward. As arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, so are children of the youth." I've always loved Psalm 113 and verse 9 that says this, "He maketh," God maketh, "the barren woman to keep house, and to be a joyful mother of children. Praise ye the Lord." One of the most touching passages in the entire ministry of our Lord to show His love and tenderness and kindness is found in Mark 10, where some women, mothers, bring their little children to Christ. It says in Mark 10 and 13, "And they brought young children to Him, that He should touch them. And His disciples rebuked those that brought them." Can you imagine the disciples? Get them kids out of here. But when Jesus saw it, He was much displeased, and said unto them, allow the little children to come unto me, and forbid them not. For of such is the kingdom of God. Verily, truly I say unto you, whosoever shall not receive the kingdom of God as a little child, he shall not enter therein. And He, Jesus, took them up in His arms, put His hands upon them, and blessed them. Wow. Do you know that the word child, children, son, daughter, boy, and girl, those words, and if you add their plural derivatives, plurals to those, are found 6,081 times in the King James Bible? I think that ought to remind us just how important children are to God. In our text reading I took from Psalm 89, I want you to see something that I thought was so important to this theme today. And that is that as we began to read this psalm, and let me just say overall that this Psalm 89 is really what we call a messianic psalm, which means it's mainly about Christ. Look at, for instance, verse 3. Now back to Psalm 89 where we took our text reading. He says, I have made a covenant with my chosen. I have sworn unto David my servant. When you see those references to David, it's not always the real David, it's his greater son. It's speaking of the Messiah who will come from David's line. And that's what it does here. Look at verse 20. He says the same thing. I have found David my servant. With my holy oil have I anointed him. Yeah, that literally happened in David's life, but he's portraying this to the Messiah who will one day rule the world as King of Kings. Look at verse 26. Now you know he's talking about the Messiah here. He shall cry unto me, the Messiah, Thou art my Father, my God, and the rock of my salvation. Also I will make him, Christ, the Messiah, my firstborn, higher than the kings of the earth. My mercy will I keep for him forevermore, and my covenant shall stand fast with him. His seed also will I make to endure forever, and his throne as the days of heaven. That's messianic for sure. But what really caught me about this psalm, and the reason I chose to use it as our text reading, is beginning right in the very next verse, he goes and shows you what happens to any people. In this particular reference to Israel, but we can apply it to our nation here in America. Any country whose children turn away from God, as the generations get worse and worse and further away from God, he says, if his children, say America's children, forsake my law and walk not in my judgments, if they break my statutes and keep not my commandments, look what's going to happen. Then will I visit their transgression with a rod and their iniquity with stripes. Now I'm so glad that I didn't have to end the passage of our reading there, because that's pretty negative, pretty dismal. He says, hey, you find me any generation, any children of any people, of any ethnicity, who have known me and have turned away from it. That's what Israel's children did. That's what is happening in our midst in America in this crisis we're facing. But thank God he said in verse 33, nevertheless, despite that, my loving kindness will I not utterly take from him, nor suffer my faithfulness to fail. He's basically saying here in these next verses that even though a generation can get to where the children forsake me and I have to punish them, if they'll but turn to me again, I will have mercy on them. Verse 37, I didn't read in the original reading, but let me finish with it. Verse 37, it shall be established, his covenant, his promise, this promise of saving any who will turn to him. It shall be established forever as the moon and as a faithful witness in heaven. Selah. Now, this idea of the generation needing to turn back to God and children being in crisis ought to be the burden of every one of us here this morning. Individually, as families, and as a church, and of course as a nation. And to turn around this crisis that we're seeing, that we might see children again taught about God and given an opportunity to know the Lord in their lives, like you and I who are saved today had that opportunity, and we're so blessed in our time. Now, the key, and I'm going to just give you the key right now and then explain it the rest of the message. The key to solve or to end this crisis in children that we're seeing, children in crisis, is simple but impossible. What do I mean by that? The answer is simple. We can't do it ourselves. It's impossible. But God can do it through us. But the answer is this. For adults who have influence over children, whether it's your own children, your grandchildren, or other children, through the church, through school, through whatever other exposure you have to other kids, us as adults who have influence, to train these children. When I use that great verse in our series on single verses a while back, Proverbs 22:6, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old he will not depart from it. You could keep that as maybe a subheading of the entire message today as well. We as adults have to be training children. And we train in two ways. And these are going to be the two main principles I'll bring out at each one of the points I'm going to go on to. We need to train them by teaching. We need to train them by example or modeling. Okay? They need both. You cannot have one without the other or it'll fail. If you don't do any teaching and all you do is an example, they won't learn it. But if all you do is teach and don't show the example, they'll think it's hypocritical and they'll not follow it. You have to have both. Well, let's go on in the message. I want to speak to you about how we need to meet this crisis that's facing our children. Now, I'm especially going to be dealing with children under 12 for a particular reason. But I don't want you to think I'm writing off the idea of teenagers. We love our teens. We want our teens to prosper. We're going to always think about our teens. But here's the reason I say what I said. The longer you and I wait to reach children and expose them to God, the harder it's going to be for them to accept it. If we don't get them young, that's why we have the programs we have. We're going to talk about that in the message. The reason it's important to get them before they're 12, because once they get into their teens, even secular child psychologists will tell you this, they get more set in their ways and harder to reach. And that's why I said it to our men who were praying with me back in the back a while back, the hardest group to reach in any church I've ever been a part of, this one included, is to reach young people 18 and over, 18 to 30. That's a dismal, dry, desperate group in every church, because most of these kids, if they're not reached and really grounded, by the time they graduate, go off to college, military, get married, whatever, work jobs, then they abandon the church by groves. We've got to reach them, and we've got to reach them young. So, let me move on. We must meet this crisis, the children in crisis, by, first of all, we have to meet it on a parental level. Number one, on a parental level. This is where it always begins, because parents are first. Before we'll talk about anything else, if parents fail, then the other three we'll talk about will really only be window dressing at best. They'll only be a Band-Aid. Parental training is the key to all children coming to know about God and one day to be saved through Christ. And so, first of all, let's talk about what the parents' role is, number one, in teaching them. In teaching them. I understand that the church is here to help parents, and we want to do that. We're going to continue to do that. But I think for too long, even Christian parents have abdicated their responsibility to the church, thinking it's the church that is supposed to teach their children. As long as they keep them in church, they'll be taught the things of God. And that has become a disaster in the making. You cannot depend on a church who might see your children 2 to 3 hours a week at best, if they come to everything, and not everybody comes to everything. 1 hour a week, we might have your child here. 2 hours. And during that 2 hours, we may have 30 minutes of that hour to be teaching. And so they may be getting, at best, an hour of concentrated study. And thank God for it, we're going to keep doing it. But if that's all they have, that'll never, ever be enough. God tells us that the job of bringing up children to learn and to be taught is of the parents. Listen to what Deuteronomy 4:10 says. In Deuteronomy 4:10, it says, "Gather me the people together." This is what God's saying to Moses. "And I will make them hear my words, that they may learn to fear me all the days that they shall live upon the earth, and that they may teach their children." Teach their children. In Ephesians 6:3, the great passage about the responsibility of parents, especially fathers who to lead their homes, he says, "Ye fathers," Ephesians 6:4, "provoke not your children to wrath." That's the disciplinary part of it. You got to be careful how balanced you are with that. "But bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord." Nurture and admonition. That's really, in a sense, the modeling and the teaching. Both. A family has to stress the importance of teaching. Now, what are we to teach our kids and grandkids? I might say for us grandparents here, we're not off the hook either. We still have a responsibility. To as much as we have an influence over our grandchildren, we better realize that we need to teach and we need to model. Okay? Now, what are we to teach them? Of course, first of all, we need to teach them the Scriptures. That's first. I don't care how smart a child is at school, and they could grow up to be the valedictorian of their high school or college, whatever it might be. If they don't know the Scriptures, they are ignorant of life and not prepared to go out into the world. We need to be teaching our children the Scriptures. Paul said of Timothy's upbringing, "And that from a child, Timothy, thou hast known the Holy Scriptures, which are able to make thee wise unto salvation, through faith which is in Christ Jesus." His mother and grandmother, Lois and Eunice, had done that for him, didn't they? And that's the job of parents. You know, my son Josh has been with us. As you know, he spoke for us last Sunday in the service. And I've been so blessed by how he's continued some things that we tried to do with he and his brother and sister when we were raising them in Ohio for all those years. Bringing them up in the Scriptures, opening the Bible, reading the Scriptures, make them memorize things. And I hear now my son, he does it every day with his kids. And we were blessed to sit there, Mama and Papa, to watch those kids quoting long portions of Scripture and doing catechism. You know what catechism is? It's a form of teaching by repetition. They memorize truths of Bible truth, doctrine, and they say them over and over and over again. It's an old but yet proven method of teaching. By the way, we have done that and tried to do that here at our church. I haven't stressed it nearly as much as I should have, and I have been derelict in that. But I will tell you, years ago when I first got here and saw our need to try to teach our kids, we put out a kids' catechism. I don't know if anybody used it. We gave it to all the kids who used to come through Children's Church, our Wednesday night program, and children's or our Sunday school as well. I won't read all this, but here's what it was. It was just called Arlington Baptist Church Kids Catechism. We gave them about 10 different, about 8 different subjects. We gave them the subject of God. Here's what we asked parents. Take this home and read these truths for your kids. You say, what's it going to do any good? It'll do a lot of good. You're implanting truths in their minds that not only will they memorize to quote audibly, but they'll be planted in their hearts. Here's the 8 truths under God. There's only one true God. We know Him as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. 3, all of the gods are false gods. Number 4, this true God had no beginning and will have no end. Number 5, God has all power and knows all things. Number 6, God is holy. Number 7, God must punish all sin. Number 8, God is loving and merciful. That's just God. And we go Christ, creation, the Bible, salvation, Christian living. Now, there's probably 50 of these, 60 of these, if you get through all 3 or 7 of the categories, whatever there is. You imagine if you said those to your kids. I'm talking about young kids now. Amen. Again, you wait till they're teenagers. They'll look at this like, I'm not going to read that. I'm not going to memorize that. They probably won't memorize it. They won't have any interest in it yet. We hope they will eventually, but most teens, if you introduce something like this, they're going to bat an eye and say, oh, that's boring. They'd rather be on their phone. But you get kids 1, 2, 3 years old. My daughter's doing it with her daughter Eva and little son Ezra. My son Jake does the same with his 2 kids, 7 and 4, 7 and 5, something like that. You take one of these catechism sheets. By the way, I put some on the table. If anybody wants one, you can look at them. Take them home. This is important. Friends, we got to be teaching our children because, hey, if you don't teach them, who's going to teach them? Who's left? You can't depend on the church to do it. Hey, thank God for a good church like ours, but I said, an hour a week? Hey, 167 hours are going to be gone from here. They're going to get a whole lot of teaching outside of our church that's going to be detrimental, sadly, because of our society now. Hey, America's not like it once was. You all know that. So we've got to teach them the Scriptures. Number 2, we've got to teach them Christian virtues. You've got to teach your kids what Christianity looks like. How do we live out the Christian life? What does it look like? What does it mean to be a Christian? How should a Christian live? They need that as well. Psalm 34 in verse 11. I love this verse. It says, "Come, ye children, hearken unto me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord." I will teach you the fear of the Lord. We need to teach our kids what Christianity should look like and what it is. So when somebody says they're a Christian but they don't live it, they'll know better. They'll say, wait a minute, whoa, that's not what a Christian is my mom and dad taught me. Grandma and Grandpa taught me. You might say you're a Christian. They'll get off to college. You'll go somewhere on a job. And they'll say, oh, I'm a Christian, with their alcohol in one hand and drugs in the other hand and pornography and all that. They'll see through that. They'll know that's not true Christianity. True Christianity produces people who live like Christians should live. Thirdly, you not only teach them Scriptures and Christian virtues. Here's a good one. I just threw this one in because I think it's so important. Teach them to appreciate godly music. Do you know how much influence music has over people? We're really missing the boat because music has a definite influence. It was rock music and the rock culture that got me into all the wicked lifestyle I was in prior to being saved. I can tell you right now. It sucked me right in. Sucked me right in like it does so. And it does that today. If you don't teach your kids the difference between godly music and worldly music, and you're not setting some standards on that, you're going to be deeply in trouble later. Because the music is not just music, it's a lifestyle. It's a culture behind it. And as you get into it, it just brings you into its whole way of life. Teach them godly music. Colossians 3:16, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly in all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another in psalms, and hymns and spiritual songs, singing with grace in your hearts to the Lord. He says you're teaching by songs, by music. I think that's important. Here's another thing we got to teach our kids, and we've got to teach them these things on a parental level. Hard work. We've got to teach our kids hard work. You know, this COVID situation and all the unjust unemployment that's been given to Americans to sit at home and do nothing and make more money than they would at a job. You know what's really exposed, which we all knew anyway, but it's really made it come to light. We have a lazy generation. If you don't believe that, go tell me why you see now hiring on every store in the Metroplex. I hardly go to any store right now. You know what? They can't get anybody to help to work. Because if you're paying people not to work and they're making more money not working, they're not going to work. But you know, as bad as that is, and I can say a lot of things about the government wasting money doing that, and that's a whole other issue. I'll tell you what the real problem is. Kids who are brought up to work and understand hard work wouldn't be doing that. They wouldn't be sitting home, being comfortable taking the government's money and sitting there playing video games and, you know, doing drugs or whatever else they're doing. Now, they wouldn't do that because parents aren't teaching hard work. I read in an Epoch Times article recently. It was a great article. It was about child rearing. It said this. It says, success in later life is directly related to childhood chores. For those who were most successful began doing chores at 3 to 4 years of age, whereas those who waited until their teen years to start doing chores were comparatively less successful. He goes on and says, the kids who are left off the hook when it comes to family chores get the idea that they are too important to do menial tasks. That's our generation today. Make your kids work. What was the famous motto? I wish I had one of my kids here. They were here last week. I told our kids many, life is about work. That had to be drilled in their mind. They probably could dream it in their dreams, that statement. They probably see my facial expression in their dreams saying that to them. I said it to them thousands of times. Josh, Jake, Jesse, you better understand something, because they do like all other kids. Oh, I'm tired, Dad. I can't do that. That's too much. I want to play. I want to go out and do this. I want to run around with my friends. I want to go watch TV or whatever. No, you work first. Life is about work. Lastly, in this teaching on the parental level, we got to teach them to pray. We got to teach our kids to pray. Now, the reason I included that is because if you teach a kid to pray, this part of the parental level of teaching, boy, that's going to solve all kinds of other issues because they'll have the right heart. People know how to pray. When people know how to pray and pray faithfully, you find me a praying person, I'll find you a spiritual, mature person too. They go hand in hand. You're not going to find somebody who prays a lot that lives a worldly life either. They're going to be committed. So you teach your kids to pray. And remember what? I was amazed by this. I wrote it down in my notes. I want to make a comment about it. The apostles, the disciples of Christ, come to him one day and they say to him, Lord, teach us to pray. Now, for the longest time, I remember that question, and I've said everything positive about it I could. It's a great thing. I'm glad they did. They didn't say teach us to preach, teach us to win souls, teach us to do miracles, teach us to pray. But you know, I saw a negative in that when I was getting the message ready this week. I thought, why didn't their parents already teach them to pray? Hey, these guys were all adult men. Where was the parents who should have taught Peter and John and James and all those other 12 guys that all their others could have been there saying the same thing? The parents must not have taught them. They had no idea how to pray. We got to teach our kids how to pray. But let me move on. I got a lot to cover. Parental level, we teach them. Number 2, we have to model before them. There's things that we have to model. Now, some of these are just going to be quick points. I can't develop them a lot because time will get away. But what I mean is, once you teach, then there has to be an example set. As I said, it's totally hypocritical. It'll be undermined completely if you teach your kids one thing, but you do another. We all know that. This isn't brain surgery here. We know that. So what are we going to model before our kids? If we're going to turn this crisis around, Christian parents and grandparents, we got to, number 1, model marriage. The greatest thing your kids can see in your life is a good marriage. That's better. I don't care if they see dad working 12, 14 hours a day like he's some, workaholic. That might have some point about hard work, but that's not going to help them in the long run. they'd be better off to see mom and dad hugging and kissing and loving each other and spending time together, and that they're their best friends. Model number 2, humility. Let your kids see humility in your life, in my life. We've got to show we're humble. It's not all about us. Kids ought to see that we're transparent, that we're willing to apologize when we're wrong, we're willing to admit when we've made mistakes, that life's not about us, and we don't always get our way. See, they need to see that. See, that's how you model things. Model responsibility. You know, responsibility is so important. I was teaching my kids when they were growing up, you pay your bills. You don't get a loan and renege on it. You don't declare bankruptcy. That is not of God. Oh no man anything but to love one another, the Romans passage says. And indeed, teach kids responsibility with money, with their job, with their time. Hey, they ought to see that in their parents. See, kids should never even think about some of the unbelievably irresponsible things we're seeing in our young people today if their parents would have lived the kind of responsible lives they should live. Keep a schedule. We don't stay up till 2 and 3 in the morning every day and get up whatever we want. That's not responsible living. Why do kids think they should do that? Because the parents aren't modeling that. Your kids are going to be what you are, but a little less. That's true. How about honesty? Honesty is a great one. Man, we got to model honesty. Don't lie around your kids. Don't show deception. You cheat your boss. You cheat on your bills, your taxes. You cut corners. Your kids will catch that. They'll think, hey, mom and dad did that. What's the big deal? Self-control. Oh, man. We spent a whole message on this one. We got to model self-control. The reason we have an epidemic of kids on drugs and into sexual sin like crazy today is because their parents don't have any self-control. They didn't show them any modeling of self-control. They're the ones that are alcoholics and drug addicts and into pornography and addicted to whatever it is. And we got to show self-control. I'm talking about Christian parents now. I'm not talking about the world. I know the world's not going to do this. But friends, Christian parents, we should be the example. We've got to be the example in these areas. We've got to show them self-control. Hey, we could go a little time without eating a meal sometimes. Maybe we have to fast occasionally. Maybe we have to do without that nice new thing, whatever that is. That's self-control. You teach them, hey, I can't just go out and buy anything I want anytime I want it. Just because I got a little piece of plastic in my wallet that says I can. No, I'm going to get a bill at the end of the month for that. You teach your kid, that's self-control. You model discipline. You model discipline. A disciplined life. I'll tell you, we have a generation, it seems to me, the more I'm seeing of it, of just totally out of control people. No discipline. There's just no rhyme or reason. Just anything goes and everything goes. And I know it's not everybody, believe me. I'm not trying to exaggerate the thing, but you see it. I mean, you'd have to have your head in the sand if you didn't see it. It's because we're not modeling these things. Long back in 1999, a good writer that I like wrote a series of articles after the Columbine shootings in Colorado. And he wrote an article called How to Keep Your Child from Being a Killer. And I'm going to give you his 8 points. I thought they were good. He said, here's how you're going to keep your kid from being a killer. Number 1, build a God-fearing home. Number 2, be dedicated to your children. Number 3, be faithful members of a Bible-believing church. Number 4, separate from evil and worldly things. Number 5, guard against wrong friendships in your kids' lives. Number 6, educate your children in Scripture. Something I already talked about. Number 7, be alert to warning signs in your kids. And number 8, pray earnestly for your children. Boy, he's right on target with all of those, wasn't he? Do you know, if we're going to teach and model our kids on a parental level to stop this crisis, to turn this crisis around, I got to tell you, it's going to take 2 things that no parent likes to hear, but I'm going to have to tell them to you anyway. Time and commitment. That's what it's going to take. There's no shortcuts. Time and commitment. That's what being a good parent's about. I read about a so-called famous political figure and diplomat in the 19th century by the name of Charles Francis Adams. And he wrote in his diary, he kept a diary every day, and in his diary he entered this statement. Went fishing with my son today, comma, a day wasted. But little did he know his young son, Brooke Adams, was keeping a little diary too. And later on, his family found the son Brooke's diary at the same day. And guess what young Brooke said in his diary? Went fishing with my dad, the most wonderful day of my life. Do you know where this is all going? Here's a dad who spends a day with his son and says, it's a waste. That's not what his son thought. That sums it up, friends. Time and commitment if we're going to reach children. Now let me move on to another level. We've got 3 more to do. We've got a parental level. That's where it all has to start. But now there's a church level. If we're going to meet this crisis, it's got to be met on a church level. Let me go into the teaching and example part. First of all, we've got to be teaching young children through our ministries. We have to be doing it. Hey folks, our children's church, our Sunday school, our Wednesday night we used to have, and by the way, we need to get it back. It wasn't just a filler. It wasn't just a time to keep your kids out of your hair so they wouldn't bother you. No, I don't believe in that. I believe in teaching our kids so that they can come to know God one day, so they understand who Christ is, so they know what it means to be saved. If we're going to teach them, we have to have children's ministries. Hey, I'm not doing it just to compete with the church down on the next block. Hey, they can do what they want to do. I don't have to answer to them. We won't have to answer to them as a church. But our church one day is going to have to answer to God for the time we spent together at Arlington Baptist Church. Did we try to meet and reach children? Our own children first. Hey, would to God we could be teaching every one of these little kids as they grow up and become teens and one day get on their own and they're saved and they're serving God and they're marrying the right people and bringing their kids up. Hey, it's a generational thing. That's what we want. And it's going to take that kind of level of commitment. We've got to reach children. And we need to start young, as I said. Hey, thank God for our youth. And we're going to take our youth on an outing this Tuesday and Wednesday. I'm looking forward to it over at Rogers Baptist Church. And I'm looking forward to seeing how well they do with that. But I'm also well aware of the fact we can't wait till they're teenagers. We better do a lot more younger things too. We're going to have classes for them. We're going to try to have events for them. We encourage the parents, of course, to get together with other parents of the church and fellowship together. This is all a part of it. Well, we've got to also model through faithfulness. We have to teach them the things of God as a church, but on a church level, we have to model through our own faithfulness. I think it's the example of our church people that will really make the difference. You know, I've had to struggle with trying to get Sunday school teachers and workers at children's church. And Wednesday night we used to have SOT over next door. And you know what used to be the struggle? I'm just being real transparent with you folks. You know I've never beat around the bush about stuff. I'm just going to tell you. I couldn't ask a lot of people to teach because they're not faithful enough to the church. It wouldn't be good for you to come and teach a kid for 1 hour and then you're not here the rest of the services of the week. What kind of example is that? Oh, you're going to come to teach your class for... We used to have people, literally, I had to take them out of children's church eventually. Because here's what they would do. They wouldn't come to Sunday school, Sunday night, or Wednesday night, or any other thing pretty much we did as a church, but they'd show up to teach the children's church. That lasted about 2 or 3 months, and I said, I'm sorry, we just can't use you anymore. We'll have to find somebody else. I had to, because that's a terrible example. What's that little kid in children's church think when he comes to Sunday school or Wednesday night or Sunday night? Where's my teacher at? Well, I don't think I'm the church. That's not right. Hey, we're modeling. Our lives are an open book, friends. We are examples. We're examples by our attendance, by our service, by our giving, by our excitement for the church. These are all things that could, deserve their own attention, but I don't have time. I'm just saying, these are ways we model things to our kids. And you know the old statement, things are better caught than taught? And that's very true with the church level of teaching and modeling. Better they see something in you than hear something from you. They'll remember what they saw in your life more than they'll remember what you said to them. There was a family in our church whose father and husband used to mistreat my son Jake. And at the time I didn't believe it and handle it not abusive. It wasn't physical or sexual. It wasn't that. But he was just hard on him. And to this very day, my son Jake's offended by it. He doesn't remember a thing that guy ever taught him. And that guy was a teacher. But he remembers how harsh he was on my son Jake. I'm telling you, kids will remember what they see even more than what you ever tell them. You know, I read this. This was an interesting little thing. I want to read it to you. I read about a couple here. This is just a hypothetical, but this is so true. When I read, I said, this might be hypothetical, this actual little article, but it's very true because it's happened many times. You'll see people who say they're Christians, but do not come to church faithfully, do not bring their kids up in church faithfully. So here's the name of the little article. It's called, Who is at Fault? A young married couple was contacted and invited to the services of a church. This is the record of what happened. The first call of the church to them, here's their reaction. Oh, we're going to start as soon as the baby gets old enough to go. This is a church contact. Reminds me of our church, how many visits we make. I mean, my wife's accused me of beating a dead horse so many times. You make a lot of visits. Here at the church, because 1 year later, they call back the same couple. The couple says, yes, we promise, but the baby's in that stage where she cries a lot. I don't get anything out of the services, and I know she disturbs other people. When she gets older, we'll come. 3 years later. I know you think we are awful, but we're not going to church because Julie doesn't want to go. Why do you think she is different from the other children her age? 11 years later. I want you to get this. See how this is transpiring? I'm so glad you called. I want you and some of the elders to come by and see if you can talk to Julie. She is running around with the wrong crowd. Perhaps if the church would provide some kind of entertainment for the young people, she might get interested. What happened? Don't call 11 years later when the kid's a mess then and wonder why. 2 years later, they call. The girl's what? 14, 15, something like that? Maybe later, I guess. Yes, Julie is married. They were awfully young when they got married. He is not a member of the church, but we hope it works out. 10 years later. Well, Julie has finally married a man who can give her the better things of life. She's on her next marriage. Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. Third marriage. This is her third husband, but she couldn't get along with the others. I had hopes that this one would become a member of the church, but the preacher preached a sermon on marriage and divorce, and he says he will never attend that church again. There must be something wrong with that church, or else it would have had a better influence on Julie. Maybe they need to change preachers. I don't know. Baloney! That's the problem of the parents. What happened? There's a lot of Julies in the world right now. I've seen it in church before. I've seen it. People that come to a church, they'll call the church, they'll bring their teenagers to church, and they're having such problems with them. They'll say, can you help us? I'll say, well, what's the problem? Oh, so-and-so's doing this, so-and-so's doing that, and they're out of control. I can't help you because the last 15 years you didn't bring them to church and have them in the right setting they should have been in. You're asking something impossible. You can't wait till then. Well, let me go on to the third level. If we're going to meet this children's crisis, there's an outreach level to this as well. An outreach level. What do I mean? Personally and collectively, there's an outreach level. Here's what I mean by outreach. It means how are we going to reach new kids? Now, personally, let me just say, you and I personally have a responsibility to try to influence other kids except for or outside of our own children. Of course we do. Now, that's not going to be easy, and it's not always going to happen, but when we do, say your extended family, you might have nieces and nephews. You may have neighbors or friends' kids. And even if you don't see them a lot, you can still have an influence. You can still say some words of teaching. You could still be a good example. You know, when my nephew Shane, years ago, you all remember my brother's Jack's son Shane, who was in all this trouble, and he still is, by the way. But anyway, I'm just going to say this. My brother called me up one day, and he said, Jim, he said, Jim, would you take Shane and let him live at your house? If you don't take him, he's going to get thrown in jail. Imagine being told that as an uncle. My nephew's going to be thrown in jail. Here's his choices. Go stay with your pastor uncle in Texas, or you're going to jail in Florida. Well, you see what he chose. He chose to come stay with me. Well, he stayed with us for 5 months. Some of you got to know Shane a little bit if you were here that long. And, it was a hard thing to do. It really was. I mean, I already had my kids staying at the house at that time, but we gave Shane one of the rooms upstairs, and I don't want to get on I'm telling you, the only reason I even did it, the only reason I considered is I said, you know what, this might be the only chance I have, my wife has, our family has, to influence Shane's life. And you know what, even though I don't still believe he's saved today, he still knows about the time with him. He was on the phone with his brother on FaceTime here when we were at the house last weekend. My brother was here. Shane, he gave me the phone. Shane's on the phone. I say, hey, how you doing, Shane? Shane still remembers his Uncle Jim and staying at our house. I don't know if Shane will ever come to Christ. I pray that he does. But I thought, you know what? We got to have some kind of outreach. We got to do something to help our extended family, people we know. How about collectively as a church? Well, outreach to children as a church has to be a priority. You know why we just did that basketball camp 2 weeks ago? It was a lot of work. It wasn't fun and games. I mean, it was fun for the kids. I'm talking about the adults now. I'm talking about the workers. You know, coming out every night for 3 hours and preparing things and get things ready and running after the kids, these workers, these coaches on the court and all that. Hey, it wasn't easy, but you know, it was so thrilling. It was so fulfilling to me because we were doing an outreach for kids. And I read an article, or not article, an email, I should say, of one of the parents. I read it Wednesday night to the people who were here. About one of the parents just thanking us for the basketball camp and how much her little boy enjoyed it. And I thought, you know, I made it worth it. It made it worth it. And we have to do something to reach kids. We've got to. We've got to do that. Now, let me inject something, and I won't be much longer, but I have to inject this here because you know my feelings about the subject of child evangelism or child salvation. As we're reaching out to new kids, we're always going to keep the right balance with the gospel. We're never going to promote a shallow, easy beliefism kind of gospel that has kids responding to things that are not biblically sound. We're never going to do that. But I hope you don't see this as a contradiction. It's not. We're going to do all we can to get kids in this church and teach them and put them in children's churches and Sunday schools and Wednesday night programs and events like we had at the basketball camp. We're going to do all we can to get them the gospel and teach them the truth. But we're not going to water it down. We're not going to change it so that there could be some kind of visible thing that happens. No. We're going to still stay with what we have as convictions. I made up this letter. Some of you probably don't even know this letter existed, but I'm going to read it to you. I made this letter up in 2014. That's the first year I was here. Here's the letter. We would have children, or parents, I should say, or workers primarily. I guess this was workers, who would come to me and say, so-and-so is interested in being saved. And it could be a real little kid. I mean, I'm talking 5, 6-year-old kids. So I made up this letter and I told the workers, would you please send this home with any child that comes with any interest in the gospel. Dear parent, we are so excited about your child's recent interest in being saved through Jesus Christ. We take everyone's decision for the Lord very seriously and want to assure you that we will continue working with your child in their understanding of salvation. We know that children are learning so many things about themselves and their world, and nothing is more important than their knowledge of who God is and how they can have a relationship with Him. We stress thoroughness and caution in dealing with all our children and our care here at ABT. It was ABT at that time. And we'll never try to manipulate or push a child into a decision they are not ready to make. Also, even if your child has made a verbal decision for the Lord already, we do not feel it's our place to give them any assurance about their salvation. Rather, we feel strongly that it is the Lord's work to show each person where they stand with Him. Our place is simply to help people know what it means to live out the Christian life when they show a desire to follow Him. In order to help your child understand more clearly the message of Christ and His Word, the Bible, we have included in this packet a kid's catechism. I just read some of it to you. For their study and memorization. The practice of children reading and memorizing great truths from God's Word has been utilized for many centuries, and we feel that it can still be effective today. We hope that you will go over these truths with your child daily. If you need any help in explaining them, please contact our church from the contact information below. If I could be of any spiritual help, blah, 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 and I just closed the letter. Well, I just want you to hear that because collectively as a church, that's where we still stand. We're still going to do all we can to try to share truth with these kids. I was doing these devotions with the basketball camp kids 4 nights, and it was such a blessing. And it was kind of bittersweet, I have to tell you. It was kind of bittersweet because in one level, I was thrilled to see the kids listening, and we didn't have any problem. I mean, I didn't have a kid get out of hand. I didn't have a kid talk out of turn. Nothing. They listened to me the whole time. Did the games afterwards, loved it, seemed to really enjoy it. But you know what was bothering me? It was really sad. The non-church kids, not our own kids, but non-church people that weren't in church. Some of those poor little kids, I would hear them, when I asked them questions, wouldn't have a clue what I was talking about. I'm talking about basic stuff here. This is not deep doctrinal theology here. I'm talking about basic stuff. And they'd say, what? They'd give me some answers way off the wall. I thought, you know, what a tragedy. Because this is where we're failing. This is where we're failing. On this outreach level, personally and collectively. Let me close nationally. I got to give you this one. This is the last one. National level. National level. How are we going to nationally as a country? I'm going to talk just about America. This could apply other places, I know. I'm not negating other countries. They have their importance there too. I want to see it happen all over the world, but we got to deal with our country right now as it's in free fall as I speak. 3 things quickly. Number 1, combat public education. What do I mean by combat public education? That seems like a strong word. Well, it is. Because my view of public education has never changed. It still is the same. I'm not down on people who use public education. I'm not their enemy, but I have serious reservations about the public education system. And I think any Christian with any conviction about what they believe ought to do the same. And so I say, here's the combating of public education. You either choose not to use it, or you've got to try to change it. That's really your only choices. If you don't use public education, then you can put them in a Christian school or homeschool your kids and make sure they're getting God in their teaching. Or, and thank God it does happen, not that much anymore. I think it's less and less effective, but I'm not going to say it can't happen. There are some cases where on a local level, a local school level, you can influence that school board and that educational curriculum to allow or at least be sympathetic to creationism, to God, to existence of God, and so on. But if we're going to combat this crisis on a national level, folks, we've got to deal with public education. Because still, do you know the numbers? I think the numbers are still about 85 to 86%. It used to be 91 and 92. Now it's dropping. But still about 85% of all children in America go to public schools. 85%. So we can't deny that there's 85% of the kids being indoctrinated in atheism. Okay, can I say that and you'll accept that without being mad at me? Is that atheistic what they're being taught? Am I wrong? It's exactly what it is. If you teach kids that there is no God, that they can't even mention God at school, that they came from apes and evolved from lower forms of life to higher forms of life without any intervention of a divine being, you give me another name for that, I'll be glad to hear it, but I call it atheism. That's exactly what it is. We have to combat that. Number 2, we need to stay informed about issues that affect our kids. We need to stay informed. I tell you, there's a lot of issues about kids today, about school, about what's going on in their school, about technology. Whoa, this is a huge area of concern that we all ought to have. You know, I understand, younger and younger these kids are getting phones. I understand that, okay, and I'm not going to fight with you about that. I can understand sometimes an emergency and safety issues of it. The kids are allowed to have a phone. Okay, you as a parent, that's your business. But boy, you better be careful about it. Man, on a little handheld device called an iPhone or an Android, whatever, they can access garbage that you and I know even adults shouldn't be watching and seeing. Music, trends. We got to be aware of these. Peer pressure. I'm saying on a national level, we've got to stay informed, Christian parents, grandparents. We better know what's really happening. Read. Keep up with what's going on. Make sure if your kids are in a public school that you watch everything they're being taught and all the curriculum and you go meet the teachers. You go to the school board meetings. I heavily suggest that. We never would use the public schools, but I'll tell you, if I had to today, God forbid, but if I did, I'd be at every one of those meetings. I'd want to know, why is my kid being taught they're a monkey, a higher form of a monkey? I don't believe that. Then thirdly, vote for and support pro-family conservative leaders. Hey, friends, we just got through a huge election, and there's going to be some more important elections coming, not too much in the future. We better watch who we're voting for. Make sure we're voting for pro-family conservative leaders. You know why? Because they're pro-family for a reason. Most of them are Christians, or if they're not, they're very sympathetic to Christianity, and they understand the Christian traditions of our nation. Those are the kind of leaders that we need. Well, before we end the service, I want to ask our friend Harlan. Where is Harlan? Where did he go to? I need somebody to go get the children's church, and he was supposed to do that. So, all right, he can go. Go get tell the children's church to come in here and the kids. I want to play a video. Are we going to be able to play that video correctly? We got it? Great, William. Thank you, my friend. It's kind of a little bit unusual, but before we even get to the invitation, I'm going to include this as a part of it. I want you to hear this video because we're going to be starting a new ministry. I've already told you a little bit about it, but we're really going to start to rev it up now that we're getting close to the new school year. It's called Kids Hope USA. And my wife is going to be the director. And I'm going to ask Darlene to say a word right after the video. Just get up here and say a word. It won't need to be long, but I want her to tell you her heart. And this is an opportunity that I think is it just seemed to happen at the right time for me. I think it's of God. That we'll have an opportunity to go into the public schools, and be able to influence kids. Now, there's going to be some walls and some things that are restrictions, of course. But all in all, it's a great opportunity. And I'm going to let the video describe it to you. Some of you watched the first video we showed a couple months back. But this one's a different one. It's only about 2 minutes long. And then Darlene will get up. And then we'll go right into our invitation. Because I want every one of our parents, our grandparents, to think about the impact that you and I can have. I'm just greatly troubled about this crisis in our children. Because if the Lord doesn't come back in the next couple of years, you think America's bad now? It's going to get worse and worse. We've got to turn this thing around. Parental level, church level, outreach level, national level. Okay? So as soon as the kids come in, we did notify. There they come. Thank you, guys. Come on in. Just have a seat for a minute. Let's hit the lights if you would. Go ahead and play that video.